Hello and welcome to the FEZ show. Today is the 21st of April 2020 and we have some great topics to talk about today. If you've been enjoying the content, remember you can hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us out and we all appreciate it. Joining me on today's show is Edward Hunter and Jack Pickering from the FEZ crew. Morning, boys.
Morning, Jack.
Good morning.
Welcome back. It's good to see you all this fine, bright Tuesday morning. The sun is actually shining. It's actually starting to get a bit warm. We're actually starting to feel the spring air, Jack, in the mornings now.
Yeah, no, I haven't been outside much because of the whole pandemic, but no, I am aiming to go to venture out to the shops later on. So looking forward to that.
Looking forward to that indeed. But we've got some great topics to talk about today, and the main one that I want to talk about is the Gen 3 car. Mainly because they've delayed the Gen 2 Evo car, and obviously we've put in this cost-saving measure, Ed, of, this 2-year cycle, so teams can either make a new car for next year, or they can carry on the Season 6 car and move that into Season 7, and then create a new car for Season 8 when the Gen 2 Evo car drops. But with the Gen 2 Evo car being delayed a season, so instead of coming out next season, Season 7, as they made all that fuss about, it's coming out in Season 8, that means we'll only have 1 year of the Gen 2 Evo car. So therefore, teams have been saying maybe we should push back Gen 3, so we give Gen 2 Evo a bit more of a run. Now, what do you think about that? Do you think that's a wise thing to do?
Well, it depends on a myriad of factors, to be honest. I guess the big thing is you've got to make sure that the teams aren't going bankrupt, basically, given, the pandemic and the situation at the moment. And Formula E basically said, we would rather keep Gen 3 in Season 8 as we planned originally, but we have a lot of options there. I think Gang said there were 3 options. There was keep it the same, delay it a year, or maybe a sort of combination where they were going to make Gen 3 less expensive and maybe delay it or not and still not have to delay it. But I think it's all really down to what the teams want, is what they're saying. It'll be interesting to see what the consensus is, because are the big manufacturers all going to be prepared to wait another year compared to, say, the privateers who some of the ones like, you think like Neo, maybe the smaller teams like perhaps Mahindra would want to get that extra time so they're not having to rush things through or try and break the bank to get the Gen 3 car ready on time.
Yeah, because, Jack, that's what most of the teams were saying over these last couple of weeks, is that, we don't know if our motorsport program can continue during this pandemic. We don't know how long we're going to go, so therefore people I'm just putting out names, not saying that these teams at all are thinking like this, but let's say Porsche, Audi, for example, they've had motorsport programs, they've pulled out of programs left, right and centre. Obviously they've said Formula E for both of those programs are a huge priority because of the way, the world is shifting towards electric vehicles. But if those companies, for example, aren't able to go racing and say, look, we don't have the funds to actually fund a race team, then, you'd have to sort of think as a series that, okay, we need to put these cost cap savings in, maybe do something else with Gen 3 to make it not so expensive.
Yeah, I think it would be a very sensible idea to delay Gen 3 by a year because of the whole cost saving measures. Because as far as I'm aware, we are upping the power again in Gen 3 up to 350, I think. And so, yeah, I think for the manufacturers, it would be a better idea to delay it. And I don't think they'd have a problem with it. I think what Formula E should do is they should give them the options and then just work together with the 12 teams to work out which one is best. Because personally, I love the look of the Gen 2 Evo. I'd love to see it out there for more than 1 year.
No, and you mentioned the specs there, so you're 100% right in terms of it producing 350 kilowatts, which will be equivalent to 470 brake horsepower. If I have a look at the specs in front of me, the car is going to go through a massive change. Like, it's going to be 70 millimeters narrower than it is currently, 160 millimeters shorter. So it's going to be a completely, well, not a different car. We don't know how it's going to look, but in terms of its size and shape, it's going to be different. And they want rapid charging as well. So they want real fast, rapid charging. So that's a lot of changes, as well as, and this is the one, Ed, that the teams are really complaining about and say this is going to be a hard challenge to obviously make parts, or the chassis to make parts, and then obviously to make the hardware to go around these parts, is that the weight is going to be 120 kilograms lighter. So it's going to be 780 kilograms that they're aiming for the Gen 3 car. Currently the Gen 2 car is at 900. So that's a lot of changes. That obviously the tender has gone out. So obviously Spark make these cars now, and the tender ended on the 14th of April. So Spark could have put their name forward. There could have been other companies that actually make the entire chassis of the car. But obviously in terms of the hardware for Formula E cars, to make the powertrain to go to 350, and then the energy management, you've also got to think the battery, because if you've got 350 kilowatt battery, is the race format going to change? Are we going to have to go back to a swap cars? Are we going to have to fit in 45 minutes? So the battery's going to have to change. There's so many things that might change, and the cost could explode, Ed.
Indeed, you've just sort of given me at least 6 or 7 things to answer there. But yeah, especially I guess with the battery, you've got the thing where at the moment, in the first season it was made by Williams Advanced Engineering. At the moment it's McLaren Advanced Technology that are making it, Matt. And of course the Gen 2 one, which was already a big step up, and it'd be interesting to see how, because the battery is obviously with so many cells in there, it's probably the heaviest thing in the car, and we already know they had to gain a bit of weight in order to. I think the Gen 2 car is slightly heavier than the Gen 1 car, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so that's a big challenge that's going to need to be overcome. I thought what you mentioned earlier, Jack, about when you singled out Audi and Porsche as having, had to cancel a lot of programs before entering Formula E, and it's interesting having that conflict of, I think, because Volkswagen and Audi Group own both Audi and Porsche. So from a brand perspective, this is what happened in World Endurance Championship. It didn't really make any sense to have 2 sister brands competing at the same time. So I know it's slightly irrelevant to this question, but in terms of if one of them was going to drop out, say before Gen 3, you could sort of see it happening because it's happened before.
No, you're totally right in terms of that. But Jack, in terms of, you can understand then why, the teams are saying maybe we should delay this a year so we know what's happening, so we can get our head around this, and then we can make a proper car rather than just, rushing sort of just to get the Gen 3 car out.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense because there will be so many changes from the Gen 2 Evo to the Gen 3 car. With the current situation, I don't think it makes much sense, because they will need the manufacturers will also need some time to create it, because it's a jump of 100 kilowatts. It's not something that they can do in about half an hour. It takes time for it to happen. So yeah, I think it makes complete sense.
But I can understand why Formula E are pushing it. So from Autosport's understanding and what we sort of, from our research that we've been doing, that Formula E's understanding is that they would like to keep it. Okay, they want to keep it on track, is what I mean, as in coming out in Season 9, so the Gen 2 Evo car only does that 1 year. Now, obviously the benefits of that is that it pushes electric vehicles forward, it moves the progression on, and hopefully some of that stuff that we've done in the Gen 2 Evo and the Gen 2 era starts feeding into the road cars, and the same with the Gen 3 stuff. So Formula E is really impacting. If you delay it, Ed, then I suppose you're delaying that production of that technology, then getting into the road cars faster and then developing electric vehicles.
Yeah, and that's another reason as well why the manufacturers might be against delaying it, especially because we've seen a lot of stuff with Jaguar in their marketing, especially if they point out that a lot of the stuff that goes into, say, electric cars like the I-Pace, which we see in the support races, the I-Pace E Trophy, a lot of that stuff is based upon the work that they've done in Formula E and has some of the same engineers worked on it. I know Nia with their EP9 car, or not, it's not a production car, but they have started making a few production cars. They had a similar sort of thing as well, and they're far from the only team. So yeah, that's a big thing in terms of the real world impact, I guess. But as ever with this pandemic, it's going to be surviving the pandemic in all senses of the word, financially and just physically surviving it. That's really important. So Formula E is really going to have to wait till after.
Yeah, I think it makes sense that if they delay it, obviously, because then everyone is, you give Gen 2 Evo a fair shout, you get the teams making deliveries. They've made such a fuss about deliveries and obviously it being such a nice car. And then if you only give it a season, it was like, well, what was the point of even changing the car? You might as well just stuck with the Gen 2 original car, and then there wouldn't have been any cost of manufacturing. You're literally manufacturing one car for one season, and you could argue that is a waste of money, Jack.
Well, yeah, I mean, we see it in other forms of motorsports every single year that they change it. However, this isn't what Formula E is. This Formula E is chassis-wise a spec series. So yeah, it wouldn't make sense just to create one car for 1 year and then just like bin it off. So yeah, I would like, yeah, I'd quite like to see it fulfill its 2-year run.
Yeah, I think so, and especially, obviously, we don't know at this precise moment if they're going to carry on this 2-year cycle. Now, we're all quite hopeful that this 2-year cycle for the cost saving in terms of how they decide to produce their cars only lasts during this sort of period up till season 8, and then we go back to everyone produces a new powertrain effectively at the beginning of every season, but we don't know. So it'd be quite confusing, and I think it'd be really confusing for the fans really to just sort of understand, that's the same car as season 6, or this is the new car, and where we are. And I think people will get lost in that. So I think just to wrap that up, overall, I think on the cusp, I think we all believe that it probably should be delayed. If it's not delayed, fine, but as long as all the Formula E teams are happy and that can, manage the cost of the Gen 3 applications and everything around that, then that would be great. But I want to move on because we did an interview with Alexander Sims recently, and he came up with this. We talked about qualifying, and obviously we talked about qualifying before, but we specifically talked about Group 1. Now, Ed, Group 1 is so bad because the track is so dirty. So can you just sort of explain to the fans really just why Group 1 is so bad? Why is it so bad compared to Group 2, Group 3 and Group 4?
Yeah, well, obviously Formula E using exclusively street tracks, which often are used just by, you would think, they're used by regular cars most of the year, so there's a lot of rubber laid down. And the problem with that is that they don't really use the same Michelin tyres, the same sort of tyres that Formula E use. I know they're supposed to be quite road relevant, and I think Michelin have done a good job in that sense, but still you have this problem with the way it's all about track evolution essentially. So there's a lot of time in between obviously practice 2 and quali. That's what I mean. Sorry. And in that time the track sort of often it can either heat up or cool down, and the grip level just drops dramatically in that time when you've not got anything running on track. And obviously we've got the sport race, but that runs only after qualifying, I believe, in between qualifying and the race. Sometimes after the race they need to fit it in that way, the regular IPC trophy. But after Group 1 there's so much more rubber laid down, the temperature of the track often rises, and then Group 2, Group 3, they've got so much more grip, they can go into corners a lot faster without worrying about, losing control on the edge and slamming into a barrier or anything like that. So it often takes a lot of skill to get a good lap time out of Group 1. You see some of the drivers can do it, but sometimes on some circuits, they're very green, as I think is the terminology. Just the track is so dirty. I think some of them say, it's borderline undrivable, but I think if that was the case, they wouldn't be able to finish the lap. And so, yeah, there's a big debate about that. The later groups, it's definitely felt often at many tracks they have a big advantage.
Yeah, so what Alexander Sims said was what you mentioned is obviously there is an hour, so there's about an hour gap between FP2. I think FP2 finishes about 10:30, and then at 11:45, so an hour and 15 minutes, Jack, qualifying starts and Group 1's out there. So it's an hour and 15 minutes. And we see all the time the fastest lap times are set in free practice 2. And when we get to Group 1, we're about a second and a half, nearly 2 seconds off that pace. Now, Alexander Sims said in this interview that he wasn't surprised at all, because you've got there's like a whole list of BMW I-Pace cars that go out to do passenger rides. They don't drive on the racing line. They do all the drifting stuff, make it fun for the passengers. So that brings dirt onto the track. And you've got even the Jaguar I-Pace cars that might go out for their qualifying session. They go out, and because they're bigger than a Formula E car, they bring dirt onto the racing line. It doesn't actually run on the actual line. So instead of the track getting quicker, hilariously, from FP2 to qualifying, which we expect from so many other series. So when you put Formula 1 into that category, obviously with free practice 3 to qualifying, the track gets quicker. But in Formula E, it just doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, no. One thing that's also quite poignant with the Formula E qualifying is you only get one lap at full power, so you don't have enough time to perfect it like they do in Formula 1. Formula 1, they go out for 20 minutes in Q1, then 15 in Q2, then 12 in Q3, and so yeah, they get to run up to about 12, 15 laps over the course of the quali. Whereas here you get the out lap, one go at 200, one lap at 250, and then that's it. Unless you get into Super Pole, then you have another go later on. But yeah, because they aren't out on track, doing laps throughout qualifying, it does mean that there is this this track devolution. I'm gonna say from FP2 to qualifying, along with the I-Pace trophy and then the BMW I passenger laps, and so yeah, it isn't surprising at all that there is this massive gap between free practice 2 and qualifying. Also with free practice 2, they may only get 250 laps, I think. Yeah. I think the rule is, but you can have about. The thing is, the tracks in Formula E are relatively short. So on top of the 250 laps, you've probably done about 15, 20 laps already in 200 watt kilowatt mode, or even in attack mode. So you are prepared for that. Whereas in Formula E, it really is one shot qualifying.
Yeah, you're totally right. And that's exactly what Alexander Sims said. He said it's so difficult qualifying, especially in Group 1, because you have that one lap, which other series obviously don't have. It is a one-shot qualifying, as you said. Ed, in terms of, you expect, obviously, Formula E, the track to improve, and obviously then you've got all this dirt. So, Sim said it's really difficult, and then it affects your race, and then it can affect your championship, as we've seen with Bird and D'Ambrosio, obviously being in Group 1 after starting so well in the season. Then they get to that Group 1, you'd expect the track to be fairly decent, because obviously, as Jack says, everyone's done sort of 200 laps. The track's gotten really clean in FP2, because you've done 45 minutes running, you've done over an hour of running in 2 practice sessions. The cars are basically out for that whole period of time, so the track's really clean. I just find it amazing how it gets so dirty between FP2 and qualifying. But then, if you get it wrong on your 1-250 lap, that's it. Your weekend is ruined.
Yeah, the track is very dirty. It's almost surprising we don't hear stories about officials dropping little banana peels on the edge of the circuit to catch out unlucky drivers. But yeah, I wouldn't accuse any officials of doing that. But yeah, I guess in a way, it's sort of part of the challenge in terms of Group 1 is always this bit of a poison chalice, in that if you're there, it's good because you're high up in the championship, but it means that you're probably going to qualify better. It's going to be harder to qualify higher up the grid, and therefore you usually end up having to make up places in the race. So it's not like a death toll for anyone's race, because on pretty much all Formula E tracks, there is at least a couple of places where you can overtake, and some tracks have improved a lot for overtaking. I think the changes they made to Mexico for this season are a good example of that. Mexico, of course, also one of the ones that has a really high kind of drop off between sessions as well, ironically. But yeah, I don't really have too much more to say. I think it's part of the challenge. A lot of people drivers complain about it, but I think what I remember you did the interview with Oliver Rowland, and he said, well, a lot of the people who complain about Group 1, having to go out in Group 1, are the ones that are bad at it. And I don't think Oliver Rowland has had to go out that many times in Group 1, to be fair. So, whereas Sam Bird and D'Ambrosio, we know have a few times. But yeah, I'm sort of in agreement with Oliver Rowland that if you don't like it, then do worse in the championship, and then you won't have to be in Group 1.
Well, hilariously, what Alexander Sims actually said when we spoke to him is he said he'd rather have scored the points in the race and be faced with the difficult qualifying session because he knows he's doing well, rather than putting so much pressure in if, say, you haven't scored those points and then obviously you have to work your way up the races and just score a few more points to add to your tally. He said obviously you're going to lose ground, but as long as you can fight back through in the race and just keep adding some points and just sort of mindly keep yourself having a margin. He said that's much better than not scoring the points early on, being in Group 3 or Group 4 and putting so much pressure on that 250 lap to make sure that you're in contention for fighting for wins. But if you get it wrong, then that's it, your championship's basically down the pan. So moving on to our final topic that I want to talk about today, and it's what drivers who are no longer in Formula E that we would like to see back. Now, I'm going to start off this. Now, I don't know why, but I've just got a massive soft spot for Loic Duval. I had a look back for his record. It was just one driver that I would like to see back because, he was great to talk to. He was a great driver, and then I look back through his record. He came in season 1 at Dragon Racing alongside Jerome D'Ambrosio, straight away on the pace, getting 4th place, 3rd place, 2 podiums, 1 in London and 1 in Berlin, I believe. So straight away on the pace, and then season 2 again, a really strong, really consistent in season 2. Picking up lots of podiums, not many podiums, sorry, just lots of 4th and lots of point scoring positions, I meant to say. And then obviously he had a 3 races towards the end of the season where he didn't score, and then he scored another 4th place in London. So he was super consistent in when Dragon were actually at their peak in season 1 and season 2. And then obviously went to season 3 and the car wasn't as quick, and the performances just seemed to drop. And obviously he had his DTM commitments, which I suppose succumbed him to sort of leaving the series. So if there was a driver I'd love to see back, it'd be Loic Duval, because he showed he was super consistent, and he was a good fun around in the paddock, and I think he was good to watch. So for me, it was Loic Duval. Jack, who would you like to see back?
Mine is Felix Rosenqvist, and that's not just because I'm heavily biased towards the country of Sweden. But yeah, no, Felix Rosenqvist was brilliant in his 2 years. I think we only had him for 2 years in Formula E, unfortunately, but even then, he showed that he was a force to be reckoned with. I think he got his first pole position on his 2nd appearance in Marrakesh, and then finished on the podium that race, and then he won in Berlin later that season, and then
could have been back to back if it wasn't for the pit lane incident with Heidfeld. We could have won 2 races back to back.
Yeah, it could have been, and then also last year, I do think no, not last year, season 4 even, mixing up my seasons. Felix was quite unlucky with the he had a mechanical problem in Mexico. He hit the curb in Rome, which sent him out the race, and there were a few other things that meant that he didn't go on to do. I don't think he even finished top 3, but no, I do think that he was one of the best drivers in Formula E, and once Sam Bird wins a championship, I think he will be the greatest driver not to win a Formula E championship.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question. Do you think, if he was given, I suppose Mahindra were a good car when he was with them, but let's say he was in that Tech Cheetah with John Eric Verne, do you think or even the BMW, for example, do you think, he could have really mounted a challenge for the championship?
I would have loved to see that. I mean, the Mahindra was good, but to see him in the Techeetah or a BMW would be quite exciting.
Yeah. So Ed, who was your driver that you're looking forward to seeing back? Well, that you'd love to see back.
Okay, I am Denard. Before we recorded, I suggested a few different ones, but I think I've decided that the person I would like to see come back is someone who I think had a lot of potential and he never really had a full season to show what he could have done. And that is Mike Conway, who of course drives for the Toyota team in World Endurance, but he did drive for Venturi in season 2 when Jacques Villeneuve, after 3 races, basically decided that he didn't want to put himself through crashing out and not doing particularly well in the Venturi. Mike Conway was brought in as a replacement for Buenos Aires that season onwards. And he actually got into Super Pole in his first appearance, I remember. And then got struggled to learn energy management. So I always felt like that he's been a really quick driver, especially in endurance cars, but I think in prototypes. But I think some of that carried over. We definitely saw some of his speed on occasion in Formula E. Last race he did was, I believe, season 3. He filled in for Duval, funnily enough, you mentioned, Jack, in Paris. In season 3, in that Faraday feature car, which I believe is also one of your favourite liveries. Yeah, I'm sort of combining several episodes that people may not have seen. But, but anyway, I think if any team was struggling for drivers, if you're a team that's a bit lower down the field, then you could do a heck of a lot worse than go for Mike Conway.
No, Mike Conway, obviously, he was so quick when he came in, and it was sort of a surprise. Like, we weren't expecting him to do as well as he did. Like, thinking of other drivers, imagine having Scott Speed season 1 just completely, boom, straight away in Miami, first race that he did, and he set the world alight. Like, what could he have done if he had a season? Jack, is there any other names, maybe, just before we end, anyone else that you think might, you'd love to see?
I did have a list. I've since lost that list. But so I'm now gonna have to think of people. Tom Dillman, he was fantastic in the Venturi. Didn't have a great season last year in Neo.
But who would?
Yeah, even Oscar Turvey struggled to score a few points.
Yeah, I am trying to think of other drivers. Stefan Zarazan, I think we had a little chat about before the start. He actually did a very good job in seasons 1, 2, and 3. In season 3, he left Venturi halfway through, went to Techeetah, and I think he scored a podium. I think in Montreal, but yeah, I think there are quite a few names.
Zarazan's kind of getting on a bit,
Yeah, but he replaced Esteban Gutierrez, and Esteban Gutierrez, he wasn't awful in that Techeetah. I don't know why. Obviously, I think F1, and obviously that was still his priority, trying to get back into that, and obviously he managed to get into
IndyCar swooped him away.
Yeah, and that's true as well. He had that test.
Mara Engel, I think, is also extremely, extremely quick. Got some really solid results, and again for Venturi before being dropped.
Yeah, that was sort of a surprise by Maro Engel. Sort of like you'd expect him. He didn't look like he deserved to be dropped. He was super consistent in that Venturi. So obviously, if he was able to get a seat back, then I'm sure he'd love to jump back into it. But boys, we've sort of run out of time. Again, a pleasure to talk to you.
Yep, thank you.
Cheers, Jack.
Remember, if you're really enjoying the content, you can hit that like and subscribe button. We'd really appreciate it. We also have a Patreon page. If you love us that much, you can help us sort of one day maybe perform these from a studio rather than our bedrooms once we get out of lockdown. But thank you so much for watching today's show. You've been watching the FEZ show, and we will see you very soon.